dialogue that Plato mentions, in which Socrates argues with a man whose basic proposition is that might makes right. That's his argument. And Socrates wants to prove to him that it is better to be oppressed than to oppress. Because if you are oppressed, it's your physical being that gets harmed. But when you oppress, you harm your soul. So that an oppressed person's soul can remain intact, even if their body does not. But an oppressor, his soul is what is destroyed through his oppression. So this is his argument. He attempts to prove to this man, and this man, he's looking purely in these terms, in material terms. He said, that's all fine and dandy, Socrates, to philosophize like that when you're 18 years old, but at your age you ought to be ashamed of yourself. You should have given up those ideas long ago and dealt with the reality of the world. At that point, he realizes in his argument that he can't reason with this person in worldly terms, and he switches the argument. And this is something that Ibrahim a.s. does when he talks to Nimrod. He takes the argument to a higher level. Because Ibrahim a.s. says to Nimrod, he says, when he asks him about Allah, he says, my Lord is the one who gives life and gives death. So this tyrant brings two slaves, kills one, and says, go ahead, you can still live. He said, I can do that. Now Ibrahim could have obviously said, with all due respect, that's a pretty idiotic attempt to explain my meaning. What I meant was God is the originator of life and he's the taker of life, and that. But he didn't say that. He could have gone that route. What he did is he took the discourse to a higher level, and he said, that's okay, pretty impressive. My Lord brings the sun from the east, and we watch it go down in the west. Let's see you bring it from the west, and we watch it go down in the east, and the Quran says, فَبُهِتَ الَّذِي كَفَرَ. Suddenly the one who was in disbelief was bewildered. He was at a loss. He had no argument anymore. So this is what Socrates says to this man is, he says, let me tell you something. I'm going to tell you something that I know is true, but you're going to think it's a myth. When you die, you're going to be raised up. That's what he says. It's in the Platonic dialogue. He says, when you die, you're going to be raised up. And you're going to be brought before a court. And that judge is not susceptible to bribery. You're going to be stripped naked of your clothes. All of those things that can influence a judge in this world, when you walk into the courtroom with your three-piece tailor-made suit, looking at your Rolex or your Cartier watch, with your dream team behind you. That's pretty impressive. If I'm a judge, I'm going to be impressed. He said, none of that's going to help you. This judge isn't susceptible to those type of trappings. And you might be able to box my ears off in this world, but if you continue on your way, you're going to get your ears boxed off in the next world. My commitment is to live the best ethical life that I can as long as I'm in this world, so that I'm saved in that court of law in the next world. And that's what I suggest you do. That's the message of Hajj. You look at all those people, rich, poor, destitute, male, female, old, young, they're all there for one reason. Ideally. And that is to say one thing. Forgive us. Allahumma innaka afu tuhibbul afu fa'fu anna. Oh Allah, you are the pardoner. You love to pardon. It's in your nature as a divine reality. So pardon me. And the message that you suddenly realize is, looking around, everybody's doing the same thing. We're all in the same boat here. And there's people crying on Arafat with tears, and some of them are shouting. And you're looking around, they're all asking the same thing, and then you start thinking, if that's what he wants the same thing I want. And you realize you're looking at 3 million people that represent the entire human family, and they all have one common desire: to be freed of the mud of their existence, to get out of that earthy nature that keeps pulling us down, to rise to something higher. And that's what he saw. And that's why when he came back to this country, he was able to do that. Because the challenge of Malcolm is that a man from a good family reduced to a petty criminal who rises above that to become a racist that attacks the system that he believed forced him into the life that brought him to the lowest of the low. And then he goes and sees another way out, which is that I don't have to go that route. There's another way. It's to realize that that one oppressing is in worse shape and in more need of the one being oppressed. And if you can't see that, you're blind. If you can't see that, you're blind. That's the message. That's what he came to say. That these people need help. And it's very, very easy to have sympathy for the oppressed. But it's very, very difficult to have sympathy for the oppressor. That's what Dostoevsky says when Jesus says, love your enemies. That's the challenge. It's not loving those who are good to you. Anybody can do that. It's actually having some sympathy for people that you're enemies. And that's why the Quran says, عَسَى اللَّهُ أَنْ يَجْعَلْ بَيْنَكَ وَبَيْنَ الَّذِينَ عَدَيْتُم مِّنْهُم مَوَدَّةً. Perhaps God will put between those who you are now in animosity with, who will put love between you. وَاللَّهُ قَدِيرٌ. And Allah is capable of doing that. Wallahu ghafur rahim. And Allah is the forgiving, the merciful. So will you be forgiving and merciful? If you want God's mercy, are you willing to extend it to your fellow man? That's the challenge. And there's only one element of people that are removed from that in the Quran. And these are the mockers, the mustahzi'un. This is the only element. These are the ones who mock people, who make fun of other people, who laugh at the tribulations of others, who derive pleasure in these things. Those are the ones that the Quran, it's كَفَيْنَاكَ الْمُسْتَهْزِئِينَ. We'll take care of these people. Don't worry about them. You see, that's the reality. That's what the Quran message is. Don't worry about all these things. Do what you have to do within the constraints of dignified behavior and with your humanity intact, because don't let your enemy take your humanity from you. So Malcolm's challenge is, can you rise above? Can you transcend the incidentals of difference to achieve the unity of the essentials? Can you do that? Are you able to rise above the incidentals of color, of sex, of wealth, to understand that despite our colors, we're human beings, we're the same. Despite our sexes, we're the same. A man and a woman are the same. That's what the Quran says. That's what the Hadith says. النساء شقائق الرجال. Women are the other half of humanity. It's as simple as that. It's as simple as that. Can you transcend that? Can you transcend the incidentals of wealth to recognize that some people have wealth from their families, other people don't? Doesn't mean one's better than the other. Are you willing to acknowledge that? It's easier for the poor to do that. It's difficult for the wealthy, because wealthy people like to think they pulled themselves up by their bootstraps, but they were born with those bootstraps. If you're poor and you don't have any bootstraps in the first place, how do you